Hello and welcome to Deep Impact, a proud member of the Doof Network where we dive deep into Wildbow's most shortest work, 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
That's me, and we are back to talk about the final arc of Pact, Judgement 16, Arc 16, 16.1 specifically.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a bit emotional knowing that we're hitting the end. It's like a really long arc, so I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. But it's crazy to think it's almost over.
Yeah, we got another, month and a half of arc left, but then that's it. And when it comes to an end, just a reminder, we're doing a nice little 24-hour live stream, so come and tune in for that, and it'll be fun.
Yep.
We're actually going to publish the schedule for that pretty soon, because we've got it almost completely locked in. So that's good.
Yeah, we'll probably publish it with a few to be confirmed, and it won't be completely final, but it should give you a general idea of what to expect.
Yeah. Cool. So, in Judgement 16.1, we're back. The lawyers have just... Well, I guess they haven't yet, but we're about to see them summon a bunch of dead folks. Actually, we're back in Rose's point of view, and she's just seeing the other lawyers arrive. And she recognizes some of them, but gets distracted as Blake basically starts sticking memories into her brain.
Yeah, he's trying to help, but he's doing it in his distinctly Blake way, which is making everyone hate him as he does it.
Yes, Rose basically gets pretty annoyed with him over the course of this chapter.
And I mean, fair enough. Like, we'll dive into exactly what's going on there. But I mean, obviously, I think the thing we've got to talk about right here is, we are very clearly just 100% in Rose's perspective. Yeah. Before, it was a bit more muddied, where it was Blake seeing Rose's stream of consciousness. There's none of that. We're externally thinking of Blake. There's no cutaways to, me versus Blake. And that, I'm thinking back to the only other one, the only other Wildbow story I have finished.
Got there in the end.
Yeah, I got there eventually, which is Spec from Worm. And thinking about what happened there. And I'm wondering if, this raises an interesting question to me, this whole thing, which is, what is Blake's perspective? What is Blake? Like, he's been giving away bits of himself, and I'm wondering if us transitioning to Rose's perspective is this story making a bit of a statement about what Blake's self is, and are we arguably still in Blake's perspective because he's given so much of himself that this is now Blake's perspective? Yeah,
I think the thing that counters that thought is Blake is clearly in there and having his own sentient thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Because he's doing stuff. We don't know that he's for sure able to be back in the space that he was in before, but he has some agency, and we don't see him make decisions to use that agency. We just see the results of it. So we're definitely in Rose's perspective here. I think, I don't know.
No, but that's the thing. Like, he's given so much of himself to Rose. Is there now, if we go back to the whole thing where we as the audience are spirits, have things now shifted to the point where so much of Blake has been put into Rose, and so many of the core bits, his connections with his friends, I think he gave her his improvisation bullshittery ability. Yep. It has so much of the core of Blake moved into Rose that Rose's perspective is now a more Blake perspective than the actual consciousness of Blake. That's sort of what I was getting at.
Well, yeah. So Rose is now more Blake than Blake. Blake is some other thing. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so we're still following the closest thing to Blake that exists.
Yeah, that was sort of the idea that came up in my head. I guess we'll see, but I mean, definitely the point is we are not in Blake's head in the sense of the entity. See, now I've just confused the terms in my head. We're in Rose's point of view, not Blake's. That's just the terminology I'm going to stick with.
Yes, I think that's the least confusing thing to do.
Yeah, and I mean, so the big thing I sort of took from Rose's point of view here is how much all this is hurting her as much as Blake. Obviously, when we were in Blake inside of Rose's perspective, it was clear how much damage it was doing to him to sort of shove memories over and stuff. And we kind of see it's obviously not pleasant for her as well.
Yeah.
Which I don't suppose I thought it would be, but seeing how bad it is kind of made me do a bit of a double take.
Yeah, it reaffirms a bit that even though they're on paper working together, it doesn't solve their problem. They're still, they still can't really coexist as entities.
Yeah, they're literally cutting against the grain, trying to work together.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other big thing here is a bit later, Rose thinks on, why she kind of let Blake hop on in. And
Yeah.
basically she decided essentially that she decided to agree with his negative sum game tactics, which I just love that as a summary of Blake, because it's not fair, but also it really is.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, this system sucks, so negative sum game in this system, arguably not that bad. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's just so interesting how she's kind of come around to his way of thinking, and that's so not where she should be. Like, this whole thing where they're working together, it's just fascinating. I can't wait to see more of it.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of working together, Rose kind of looks over and notices that the new people from Toronto that have joined are really not providing a united front. They're not, attacking each other, but it's quite clear, at least to Rose, that they're all divided up. They're all kind of split up and divided. So that's, I'm sure, going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, it really takes me back to when Blake was in Toronto trying to deal with these fuckers. Like, they just...
Yeah.
He had to literally move mountains to get them to work together.
Yeah,
and it's a bunch of selfish people who it doesn't come naturally to them. It's going to be interesting to see if they can learn to be better going forward.
Yeah, we shall see. So something else that's interesting on that is Rose kind of thinks, oh, it's so obvious that we're so divided. But in our point of view chapter last time, from a different point of view, that lawyer did not notice these divides. It went uncommented on, so maybe it's not as obvious as Rose thinks.
I don't know. That lawyer was canonically shit at everything.
Yeah, he was canonically bad.
So, like, just because he didn't notice doesn't mean Levin and Lewis didn't.
True. So I think one other thing before we get into the chapter proper is we kind of have been talking about the idea that Granny Rose didn't prepare her grandchildren for this. And Rose kind of finally clicks on why that is with a hint from Blake. It's that the lawyers basically flooded the important information that Granny Rose left behind with all of her other notes and diaries. So, presumably Granny Rose will have left... Obviously, she left the letter, but she might have even left some other stuff too. And the lawyers just made sure that there were enough diaries that it was impossible to string the important pieces together, basically.
I read it differently. I thought Granny Rose is the one who hid the important information amongst the trash.
True.
Like, it was her hiding it from the lawyers with the hopes that her grandkids would see through it, which... they did eventually.
Yes.
They got there.
And Rose kind of notes that now Blake is able to just basically be his research assistant, finding the important bits and serving them up to her as she needs them.
Yeah. And I mean, like, as you mentioned, we've often complained that Granny Rose never gave any prep to her grandchildren.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big reasons I always felt the need to complain about that was because it didn't really make sense to me. She seemed smarter than that.
Yep.
And you think by now I would have learnt to give this story more credit than that. But yeah, I mean, here I am again sort of saying, well, yeah, of course, this makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense. And yes, you should have given the story more credit, Elliot. So yes, Rose's perspective kind of catches up to what we saw happen last chapter, where Mrs. Lewis summons a bunch of spooky ghosts, and everyone starts to basically freak out.
Yeah, and of course, Alexis pops out, which is really interesting because this really affects Rose, and it affects Rose's heart, which annoys Rose's head, because Rose isn't used to having feelings and she's not really equipped to deal with them. Like her response to sort of having her heart broken at seeing Alexis is, oh, this is inconvenient.
Yes, exactly. I love it.
We can sort of see how not all of what Blake was pushing made it through.
Yeah.
And you got to wonder, like, inside, is Blake kind of having the opposite existential dread at, like, knowing that he should be upset seeing Alexis and he isn't?
Yeah, interesting. I suspect that would be happening because we know he's been ruminating on other Alexis memories after he shoves them to the surface.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just, it's another example of how what these two are doing to each other is just kind of hurting them both.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's working in some other ways, but they're really killing themselves to do it.
It would be so frustrating to be Rose because Blake has just kind of turned on the button that means you have emotions, and the attack that Mrs. Lewis goes with is obviously such an emotionally driven one. Like, you would be like, man, fucking Blake, come on.
Yeah, I think she phrases it perfectly later on, where she's just like, yeah, it's around when the bit I quoted before about the negative sum game, where
Yeah,
Rose is just sort of like, yeah, I knew I'd get dragged into his just like jumping in headfirst bullshit where he doesn't think about the big picture.
yeah.
And that's kind of what you're describing here. Like, Blake is just giving her emotions for one bit, and now it's coming back to bite her, and Blake doesn't really think like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's explicit discussion in this chapter of Rose being the long-term planner and Blake being the short-term planner. Uh,
Yeah,
this is a great reflection of that, right? Rose is
yeah.
annoyed because Blake shoved some tool into her that was useful in the moment, but now is a detriment.
Yeah.
So Rose notices that these dead folk seem to remember things that they shouldn't, and she looks at them with the sight, and this reveals that they have these kind of burning connections tying them to their, living connections.
Yeah, so to kind of like extend on what you were talking about before with like how an emotional attack was so perfect by Miss
Yeah,
Lewis right now,
yeah.
like because obviously it's great for Rose, but we've also discussed whether they might have pegged that this is far from a properly united group. And this feels like the perfect play for that. Like this pretty quickly divides everyone's attention into their own thing, and they're not really a unified team anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I want to touch on that because it's interesting to me. The kind of feel of the first half of this chapter is Rose obviously knows that this is some kind of trap because it obviously is, right?
Yeah.
And she's seen the site and she kind of explains this, and she doesn't really know exactly how it's a trap, and it feels like without that, people are starting to get suckered into it. And so she's kind of forced into this weirdly passive position that I interestingly think Blake would kind of bluster his way through. And that seems to be what helps her get through it later. It's an interesting feeling where it feels like the Rose bits are actually really hindering her in this situation.
Yeah, I think that's true. Although I think there are cases where it's the other way around, and I think we'll get to one
Well,
soon. But
yes.
the yeah, I mean, I think the thing that felt weird to me here is like it was so obvious when you used the site that these things were like tanking connections,
Yeah.
and as Rose brings up in a little bit, like they came from demons. I'm a little bit confused as to how everyone but the Sisters of the Torch seemingly started to fall for this, and
Yeah.
presumably Isadora, but she's just keeping the fuck away because she's super susceptible to this stuff from memory.
I think the Thorburns might fall for it more if they actually gave more of a shit about it.
Yeah, Callan's the best you could do, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I think it worked. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like this sort of emotional play, like you see this a lot in things that have like shapeshifters or something, right? Like the idea of bringing the ghost of the loved one back and taunting heroes with it. And I mean, it's a staple for a reason, which is because like it's powerful and it kind of works. And that's sort of what you see here, where even knowing that these are demons and stuff, it still hurts, particularly the astrologer and Fell's niece to
Yeah.
sort of see this happening.
Yeah. The dead kind of start edging around them, getting closing in on them, and it becomes harder and harder for the people involved, the living, to kind of discount these dead, relatives and friends because they're acting more and more real and more vulnerable, and it really just suckers you in.
Yeah, and because it's kind of a brutal. Like, I mean, it's a demon, so sure,
Yeah.
but it's a brutal way of attacking someone, like pulling out their memories of someone they love and then taunting them with them as you destroy them. Like,
Yeah.
that's fucked up. I love it.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not even an attack. They're doing this just as just to kind of fuck with you, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well, this is the distraction.
yes, I mean, Rose thinks it's a distraction, but I don't even think it's that because, I mean, we haven't seen what it's distracting for, I guess, but
I assumed it was Barbie's entrance at the
yes,
end.
yes, but it just seems to be, I don't know, it just seems to be them fucking with them. Like,
Oh yeah, I mean Miss Lewis is at the helm, right? Like I'm sure
yeah,
it's that too.
yes,
She's
it feels sadistic. That's what it is.
yeah, she's a two birds with one stone kind of woman. I imagine. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure that they're both true.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So obviously these are all fairly sad, Fell especially, but I think the one between Diana and Doug is especially
Yeah.
sad because we know the history and we know, like, she would literally do anything to bring him back.
Yeah, the second we saw one was Doug, I was like, oh, this is gonna suck.
Yep.
Because Diana's whole thing has basically been how she's been living to live up to his memory.
Yes, exactly.
And like she as a character is very largely defined by missing Doug. So as soon as I saw one was Doug, I was like, oh fuck.
Yep.
She does well though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she does do quite well in a bit. We get this bit where Peter is quite blunt and starts swearing at them, and then Rose kind of channels that and some Blake energy to be blunt herself, and she kind of gets the group around her on side enough to buy time and realizes the trick behind this. The dead are constructed from memories and the kind of connections of the living.
Yeah, so I love how this all sort of starts as well with Isadora being a dick, like, because Isadora's kind of struggling the most with this. And
Yeah.
so she just she actually turns sort of to Blake and is like, I told you should have just killed yourself.
Yep.
And
Thanks,
Rose
Isadora.
is like, yeah, helpful as ever. And Rose is sort of like, oh, Blake would have just stubbornly told her to fuck off. And then, like, a few seconds later, she finds herself with the ability to stand stubbornly like that.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I think Blake probably heard Isadora say that and was like, well, fuck off. And then Rose is like, oh, I wish I had Blake's ability. And he's like, oh, here you go.
Yeah, perfect timing.
But I just love how it's never stated. Like, I think both times I read it, immediately came away with this sense that Blake had donated this to her, but in a way that, like, the text didn't have to say it. Like, Rose didn't have to pause and think, oh, he's given me the ability to be stubborn, because that didn't make sense. Like, Wabo found a way to construct the scene around it so that you just are like, oh, okay, he's done this. That's nice.
Yeah, it's to the extent that I don't even know if it is Blake or just Rose drawing on her own stubbornness, but whatever it is, it feels very Blake.
Yeah, I'm pretty convinced Blake just sort of gave it to her in response to Isadora and her thinking that.
Yeah. Can we talk about how Trick Fell was like, no, this isn't a trick, but this is a trick. It's clearly a trick. So was Trick Fell lying? Was he trying to pull a double trick? Or does he believe it? I'm trying to figure out what we think is likely.
Yeah, like, I mean, the two scenarios that jumped into my head were, as you said, that Trickfell genuinely believes that he's not a trick, or that, if Trickfell's all about messing up the connections anyway, like, lying would be a good way to take those connections. So, yeah, I don't know. I tend towards the former. It's kind of more scary, the idea that they're such good replicas they don't even know that they're replicas.
I quite like the idea that we just kind of have forgotten that things can lie.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They wouldn't be bound by anything, would they?
It's such a... Point. Usually things just can't lie so much that if something can lie, it's suddenly a big twist that they're actually a trick.
That wasn't even on my list. That's a good point.
Yeah. I want to touch on this line that Rose thinks about, where she thinks on how Blake has given her emotions and thinks he might not see the full picture. Like the fact that she'd agreed to be a scourge and he'd just given her an experience the Abyss had used to get one more hook in him. And so she's obviously kind of bemoaning the fact that Blake's the short-term thinker, not a long-term thinker. But this is like the whole definition of their relationship, right? I don't know why she's surprised by this.
I mean, to be fair, she still doesn't remember most of their time together.
That's true.
Some of that stuff may not be as well defined for her as it was for Blake.
Fair enough.
And us. I don't know.
There's a bit I like coming up where Blake kind of, gives her a little nudge in her soul, and she realizes that he's saying that she has been too big picture and she needs to kind of scope in a bit more, which is a great moment.
She starts sort of drifting off and thinking like more long term, and Blake just sort of shakes the building. He's just like, no, stop.
Yeah.
Like, bigger fish.
Yeah.
Or I guess closer fish. I really liked this. Because I'm choosing to see it as Blake trying to adapt how he's doing. Like, if he's tapped into Rose's consciousness still, he's probably seeing how much this is annoying and affecting her, and he's trying to come up with less aggressive means of getting through to her, because this seems to hurt less, him just sort of rattling around a bit. But it's really fun. Like, something that comes up a lot in this chapter is, or at least for me, is this idea of, how these two work together or how they're different. Like, we see some Rose-isms, we see some Blake-isms, we see them complementing each other. Like, I feel like this is going to be something I want to track very closely moving forward in the arc, is how these two play off of each other like this.
Yeah, definitely. I'm interested to see, as they get better and better at collaborating, how high that can reach.
Yeah, and how long have they got before, like Blake is getting punier and punier, right? Like,
yeah, they've got about, I guess, 15 or 16 chapters.
yeah, tops, yeah.
Yeah, so Doug is close enough to reach out to Diana, and she almost gives in. I think she says something like, well, is it worth it if I get to be with him again? But in the end, she does a superpowered LED star explosion and summons a giant crane to attack him, and the dam is broken with that, and the fighting kind of starts in earnest.
It's a really cool moment. Like I was really enthralled by this as it was happening.
Yeah.
I kind of thought she was going to do it for a sec.
Yeah, me too.
And I mean, just the idea of it as a metaphor for kind of her overcoming this, like she literally turns into an angel-like being for a second, which, given recent events, is an image that may not hold as high esteem as it might have.
It might even be a drawback.
But wait, no, it's this beautiful moment where she kind of defeats her demons in a way and becomes an angel for a second.
I like that.
I quite liked it.
Yeah. Yeah, so the fighting starts, and almost immediately the shepherd is confronted by his ghosts. Nice wordplay, nice kind of thematic callback, I guess. And he is killed. And it feels, I don't know. I don't know whether I should feel bad for him, because obviously he's a huge dick. He's kind of definitely
the worst.
A villain, but we saw that he was, although we didn't get the full picture, we did see that he was kind of twisted by regret from something about these three children, presumably how they died. It lost him his life in the end, and that is sad-ish.
Yeah, like if it had to be anyone.
Well, yeah, true.
No, you're right. Like we just talked about how Diana sort of overcame her demons and her connections here. Seems weird to be celebrating overcoming connections, but I guess that's what demons do. Whereas like the shepherd couldn't. Like I think it says that the shepherd doesn't even fight them. He basically
he just lets
I think he kind of
happen.
knows what's happening, and this is his way of getting the penance or whatever.
Yeah, I think he sees it as kind of karmic retribution.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's been a long time. Like I think so much of this was set up in 7.x, and it's obviously been over 6 months since we read that. But I remember the shepherd feeling particularly guilty about these kids and wanting to make it up to them. And I think he maybe just saw this as a way that he felt he could do that.
Well, presumably they died, and that is what led him to become, I guess a shepherd, a Valkyrie, whatever it is, something that guides the spirits of dead things, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So that in itself is enough to hint at the tragic backstory here.
Yeah, but still, he was a dick to everyone about it.
Yep. So fuck him. Rose kind of dodges out of the way of a shot from Fel and falls to the ground. And she's attacked by one of the moats, Surbus, who gets frozen in time and then exploded by lightning and is still going. Like, what a fucking baller. So Rose kind of freaks out a bit and yells out to Faisal to stop this, and that's kind of signal enough for everyone to stop fighting for a moment to see what Faisal does.
Yeah. So I guess I'll go with where you started with that, which is Surbus.
Yep.
He's a little pain in the butt. I mean, I think Rose starts to imagine that he might be immune to the practice, which is like, that's pretty powerful. I'm like, that's got to be one of the earlier choirs, surely, because that feels like just a raw power. Maybe, sorry, I'm thinking a lot about the choirs of stuff because of our discussion question. Like that feels like a third choir type thing, like how Barbie can get into domains and stuff.
Yeah. Whatever it is, it's clear that he is. I mean, even these moats are strong, right? Like, he at least has 3 lives, if not more.
Yeah, he's at least a third of a cat.
Yeah. So this other thing is this scene where Fel shoots Rose is so good because Fel kind of turns his gun on Rose and she dives out of the way, and then she kind of realizes that he hasn't shot yet. He was just waiting for her to dive, and then he just points at her and shoots her. Like, it's so perfect. And if not for Evan, Rose would totally have just gotten shot, which, again, Evan saves the day. Definitely Rose is mostly Blake if that's been happening.
Yeah. I mean, that's the interesting thing. Like, something we've been calling out since Arc 10 was how Rose and Evan were never in sync, and Blake and Evan totally were.
Yeah.
And you can see them, again, it's clunky, but they get to work together a little bit. And, like, it's that idea of the bits of Blake going into Rose, I guess, or for whatever reason, there's just this gap is closing a little bit.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that we see in this sort of scuffle is elder sister seems to be controlling the eye of the storm, which is
Mm.
I don't know. Like they were obviously bound to a flame spirit beforehand, but I don't know. Is this an upgrade? This feels like an upgrade. The eye of the storm feels pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the way the sisters work, I feel like they were tapping all sorts of different powers from the elemental they
Yeah,
had, whereas the eye seems more like something that's sentient and you just like ask him for favors as the Lord. You're right, it
yeah,
does feel like an upgrade. He comes in pretty fucking handy here.
yes,
Um, and like it was a good call by the elder sister to bring him in. And I mean, I think that's kind of something I just want to like quickly shout out is the Sisters of the Torch, far and away the most competent members of the Toronto team here. No wonder they took over.
yeah,
Isadora, extenuating circumstances, but she's kind of hobbling out back.
yeah.
Everyone else just kind of fucks around. The elder sister's really the one who saves the day here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the sisters are going to be quite good allies.
Yeah, if
Yeah,
elder sister can pull the rest of them in, that'd be useful.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, Faisal is here. He kind of calls for this scuffle to end and for them to basically need to come to a better understanding through words, not through violence. And Mrs. Lewis seems to agree, but then Faisal basically is zapped by the lawyers in combination with Barbara Harness, who has risen from the depths and is here to fuck shit up.
I love how in this chapter there's like 3 or 4 of those like big powerful being comes
Yeah,
back and has switched
yeah,
sides.
true.
Like the eye shows up and starts zapping people, and you're like, oh, it's our old enemy, but he's on our side. And then
Yeah,
Faisal swoops in, and then Faisal is countered by even bigger, more powerful goody turned bad.
yes,
It's very fun. And I mean something I feel like we should talk about here that we kind of haven't given enough credit to over the last like 3 or 4 chapters is throughout this whole scene with so much going on. I feel like Wildbow's been doing an excellent job of like giving us snippets of these mysteries and then
yeah,
distracting us. Like there was a bit in I think it was early 15.7 where Rose was sort of like, it's weird that Mur hasn't done anything yet, and then he it delivers on that at the end of 15.x.
yeah,
There's the bit early in this chapter where Rose notes that the lawyers have disappeared and like this is just a distraction. That comes back here. There's she notes that they're holding a bunch of items as well, and again that comes back later. Like I think with so much going on in this scene, Wildbow's doing such a good job at quickly highlighting that there's something off, then distracting us with all the shit that's going on, and then when those things get delivered on, you're just like, oh yeah, of course. Like I remember having my attention called to that, but I forgot about it.
yeah. And I'm sure that this distraction has set the seeds for more of those that we haven't seen pay off yet.
I wouldn't be surprised. The lawyers don't seem like the one and done type
Yes.
of people. They probably have backup plans on backup plans.
Yeah. But yeah, Faisal dies, right?
It seems so. Yeah.
Yeah. So see you, Faisal. You came here to clean stuff up and to take down your harness, and you basically totally fucked that up. So good job. Not just that, you also fucked up the chance for proper progress that Jacob Spell had. So 10 out of 10. See you, Faisal.
Oh no, but Faisal foresaw Johannes's plan failing, and Faisal's very good at forethought. That's how he ended up in this situation.
Yes, he clearly is a master planner.
Yeah, no, he done goofed hard. It seems fitting because he, manipulated the shit out of everyone, and yeah, like I want to feel bad for him, but really I just feel bad that they lost the angel on their side. I love how Miss Lewis phrases this, like when Faisal is like, surely we should just. He's like, surely it would be easier and better to have like an ongoing working relationship, and Miss Lewis is just like, yes, that is true, and then the flute or the pipes music comes in, and it's just like that was a 10 out of 10 tricky truth, sneaky truth there, Miss Lewis. Like it's so good. I burst out laughing when Miss Lewis is like, it's right. It would have been easier if we just had a working relationship, and then the pipes start. You're like, oh, Faisal's so fucked.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, it's good times. Yeah, bye, Faisal. You were a fun character, but you really just fucked everything up. So yes, the lawyers and Barbie prepare for the finishing blow when suddenly they explode. which I think surprises everybody involved. Ellie is back and has brought Andy, and Andy's brought his rocket launcher, blowing them up. And they basically all start to run before the lawyers, who will obviously survive this, start to pull themselves back together.
Yeah, they've got. I mean, this is a very temporary. This is like okay, we've got 10 seconds head start type situation.
Yeah. It's fun that the rocket launcher comes back though, right? Like, it was seeded way, way long ago, and now it finally returns, and it's not, Andy thought of it as this is going to be a thing that ends Jacob's Bell, or ends the, the council of Jacob's Bell. But really all it's being used here for what, like 10 seconds, 20 seconds of time buying?
Yeah, you're right. Like I just sort of went on a whole rant about the sort of little bits of seeding Wobbo's done in the last 3 or 4 chapters, but this chapter's full of stuff that's been seeded arcs ago. Like that bazooka thing is just like, you're like, oh, like how did I forget? In fact, I've actually been meaning to bring up for a while now. Like I think there was a throwaway line like 4 chapters ago when they first got out of the library where it was like, oh no, it was when the lawyers first came and they're like, oh Ellie, go back to the witch hunter we left you with, and I was like, wait. Eva's back? Turns out no, Andy is. And like, as well with all the Toronto characters, like we're getting delivery off stuff like with the Shepherd, that's from 7.x. Like this is ancient stuff being dragged up as well as modern stuff. Like it adds to that sense of the story coming together.
Yeah, I mean, it's been happening last arc as well, but it really does feel like every dangling thread is coming in, and actually all it's really being able to do is buy seconds of time. Eventually they're going to run out of dangling threads to put between them and their untimely death.
Yeah, you're right. The stakes are so high now that all these big things coming back, like the bazooka, it's like, okay, cool, so Andy's big bazooka that was going to kill everyone bought us 10 seconds.
Yep.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, Faisal's out. The Toronto crew is here, but it seems like they're able to help somewhat, but probably not entirely. And it's kind of like we're running out of favors to call in. We're running out of potential characters that have been seeded that we can pull back in. I don't know. It's the end game, all right.
Yeah, like I was starting to wonder who else we could call in now. Like I think my go-tos when we've talked about this in the past have been like, oh, maybe Isadora will come back and she'll help.
Yeah.
But we're through every one of those. My one shred of hope, like the only idea I've come up with is that Barbatorum hates structures and the lawyers seem pretty structured, so maybe he'll attack them on principle.
Yeah, you've solved it.
I mean, I give myself 0.0001% chance of being correct, but I feel like we're going to make it to Led's house and there's going to have to be a regrouping because, like, I feel like there's just going to have to be a bit where everyone sort of sits around and they're like, okay, so what the fuck do we do?
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're just going to die very soon.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be a fun second siege of a house in this town.
Yes. Duress 2.0. Yeah. But that's where Judgment 16.1 ends. We'll have to see what plans this motley group can come up with next time.
Yeah. So for now, why don't we just dive into the myriad of great answers we got to this discussion question this
week.
It.
Love a good discussion question that inspires lots of people to pull up interesting cultural, phenomenons, supernatural cultural bits.
I hadn't heard of anything that came up today, which is fantastic. Like that's exactly what you want, I reckon.
Yes. I've heard of one thing from D&D, and that was it.
So I guess I'll get us started. So Brawl 97, and to remind everyone, the discussion question was, pick something from your local folklore or whatever, and talk about how it might operate as a demon in Pact and what choir it might belong to.
Mm-hmm.
So Brawl 97 was thinking of Adlets, which are this sort of race of half-dog people from Inuit mythology.
Yep.
And tied it to the sort of incest demon we saw in Black Lamb's Blood, like just thinking on the sixth choir and this idea of human sins.
Yeah.
Brawl came up with this idea of like a minor sixth choir demon, or maybe even a fairly major one. There was some sort of demon of bestiality that might have, been manipulating people into breeding with dogs, basically, and specifically, as well as just making them do it, having this sin manifest as, insane mythological creatures that attack people.
Yeah, I can see that. Makes a lot of sense.
There was actually a response to this, which David L. Hunt brought up, which I think this is going to be a theme for this section. David noted that it could also be of the fifth choir, depending on how you frame it. If it was around inverting the natural order, either like man laying with dog type situation,
Yeah.
then that's almost more fifth than sixth choir. So it
Yeah.
depends on sort of how it's all framed. And these two eventually sort of decided on the idea that labels are dangerous, which is fair. But like something that came up for me reading all of these is thinking, oh, that might not be third, that might be fifth choir or something.
Exactly. This discussion question really was try and apply a label onto something that doesn't quite fit, or at best will only mostly fit. So of course, if you encounter any of these demons in real life, we're not taking any accountability for that. Deal with it in your own way.
Yeah, I know. I guess for me, this just sort of started to highlight like how murky the distinctions between some of the choirs still are for me.
Yeah,
and I think that might be by design. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, it's like, everything in Pact it's never a strict adherence to a rule, right? That's never really the way things work in Pact. And I think this is just another manifestation of that.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I want to pull out an answer by Thunderfulness, who I don't know if we've had answer a discussion question before. So
no, welcome. I feel like I'd recognize that name.
Yeah, it is a good
pretty
name.
Good.
Yeah, welcome Thunderfulness. Thank you for your answer. They talk about a Balinese kind of demon called Rangda, who was a princess that was exiled for witchcraft. Actually, I'm not sure whether that was correct or incorrect, but it became correct because after that she basically started tempting others to also start practicing witchcraft, in addition to kind of general evilness, causing plagues, natural disasters, your standard evil demon kind of stuff. So Thunderfulness talks about In Pact should be a pretty good candidate for second choir, basically just existing to cause chaos, tempt others to be chaotic as well. She would live in the jungle, she has a panda, and she would fuck over... Sorry, not a panda, a panther. And she would fuck over practitioners who are, trying to do good. So a classic demon, which I quite liked.
Yeah. I almost wonder if that's more seventh choir than second. Like, again, this is just this thing. Like, I feel like it all depends on the framing and exactly how they operate.
Yes.
That sort of sneaky tricking people into doing witchcraft just reminded me of the whole spreading Diabolist books that we've talked about the seventh choir doing.
Yes, I think there's strong reasons that it could be ruin or even subversion of order as well, especially because she's got quite a natural theme that can quite easily tie into some of this other stuff. So again, we're not Diabolists. That's our legal disclaimer.
Also, just like a public service announcement.
Yeah,
seems worth stating. We got a great one from Bisexual Punch Party, who talks about the Jin and Mock from the Vertigo Lucifer comics, which I'm pretty sure is what the TV show is based on. But basically, the Jin and Mock in this comic series, they kill people and they take their bodies. So they're kind of body snatchers, but to keep the body maintained, they need to feed off of like memories of the person's look, and obviously that disappears over time. So eventually they'll go and take a new host. But Bisexual Punch Party likened this to feeding off of connections. Like obviously the connection system's so great for just being able to represent this idea of like everyone's memories of this person fading over time.
Yes.
And so Bisexual Punch Party compared them to something from the Choir of Ruin. Like to me, it kind of felt like Myrrh meets Barbatorum.
Yeah.
So, like, I guess that makes sense. So this could be a mote of Barbatorum or something. I don't know if we got told what choir Myrrh is in.
Yes, true. I'm not sure. But you're right. It definitely feels very Pact Demon-esque, right? Like taking something that is a staple of the world and a core part of the world and turning it into something that can be abused horribly.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to pull out a response by Bigomiko, who talks about the concept of the evil eye, which is something that exists in a lot of cultures and varies a fair amount, but kind of is
Earth.
Pardon?
It's in Middle Earth.
Yes, right. Yeah, so it gets all over the place.
I mean, that's just one culture it's in, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, I see. The Middle Earth culture. But yeah, so basically it's a malevolent force, or in some ways, in some cultures, it's kind of a force that is malevolent upon somebody, but only somebody who does evil to others, especially to innocents. So, it's a bit of a Dexter of a spirit, So Bigomiko thinks that in Pact this would manifest as a demon that kind of takes the place of a spirit, And latching onto that second version of the evil eye a bit more, where it is a kind of karmic retribution force. It would observe a practitioner and basically force things that they say to become false, so that they can be quite easily forsworn. Basically, a demon that exists to fuck up your life, not directly, but by making it so that things you do or say become incorrect, which I like as an idea. And of course, the evil eye kind of in the human world, I suppose, is warded off through small rituals similar to, like, touching wood or kind of anything that acknowledges the evil eye. There's this interesting saying in Hebrew that Bogomiko brings up where if you add no bad eye to the end of a simple promise, it kind of, is like a double promise. Like the example they use is, I'll be there by 2 p.m., no bad eye, which just means you can bet on it,
Yeah, so kind of like similar to the way you'd use like pinky promise or
yes,
something.
exactly. But explicitly calling out no bad eye, right? And that kind of leads into the idea of acknowledging the evil eye and taking some small step to ward it off is usually enough to deal with it, because, if you know that it's affecting you, obviously it won't be as effective. So similarly, in Pact, if the evil eye exists, you can just kind of acknowledge it and it will more or less lose interest in you. So I like this.
I like this framing of something that in the law, like is something that targets other evildoers and making it something that targets practitioners.
Yeah.
Kind of singling them out as selfish or whatever. Because, In Pact, it could just be that it targets practitioners because it's from Ruin or something, or the Choir of Ruin.
Yeah, but
and wants to bring powerful things down, but like that got turned into in folklore. It targets assholes because it's targeting the practitioners.
I love that. It's very Pact, right? The idea that even just by becoming a practitioner, you already are losing some battles, and this is one of the demons that really exemplifies that.
Yeah. So I also wanted to pull out one from All Seeing Eye number 70. All Seeing Eye cheated a bit. They listed a couple.
Cheater.
The bulk of their answer was the Aicha Candicha from Morocco, which is this sort of succubus type creature that, in a very patriarchal society, it was all about like emasculating men, like it was making them weak and impotent was sort of the focus of what it did. And All Seeing Eye number 70 suggests that this could be like a fifth choir type situation.
Yeah.
As I thought about it, I thought the third fitted as well. Again, it just proved to me how bad I am at categorizing these sorts of demons.
Yeah, I think, again, it feels like it could be anything, right? It could literally turn into any kind of, not anything, obviously. Probably not all of them, but it feels like there are a lot of crossover between these demons in some really interesting ways.
Yeah, well, sorry to jump around a bit, but going back to Big O Maiko's one about the evil eye, like the concept of something having that form that's so loose, like the evil eye, that I think the only thing we've seen like that is like so I could see that being first choir. Like, I don't know if they're always so... I don't know if that's actually a thing for the first choir, being so kind of abstract.
Yeah.
But like, it feels like it would be related to whether it's, in the same choir or on the same level or something.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I can see that.
So All Seeing Eye 70 also just brought up an owl of sickness, which basically leaves children sick and disabled and makes adults sort of get sick in the way that they no longer get any nourishment out of eating, and then they die. So that feels like, third or fifth choir shenanigans again.
Yep.
And then there's also a hyena legend that's sort of in this local area of Morocco that makes everyone go insane, and was a pretty good candidate for the fourth choir, which was the Choir of Madness.
I like the way you've written it down, which is a fourth choir hyena that makes people go crazy and laugh all the time. Just sounds horrifying.
That was part of the way it makes you go crazy, is you get like a laughing sickness type thing, which is, that it's, terrifying. So it fits.
Yeah. I guess our final answer is from Sahibimum7, who brought up the Changeling from D&D, which is, also from common mythology, Gaelic mythology especially, I think. And Sahibimum kind of thinks of the imp, thinks of changelings as basically an imp that was trying to learn and grow, kind of taking bodies and connections. And I think it reminds me of how in 15.x imps were described as kind of feeding off of the people around them, and this is kind of another manifestation of that.
Yeah, like I think something Sahibum 7 brought up that I hadn't really thought about was it took me back to how Pose was, trying to grow in power and trying to learn things. Or that was sort of what Rose was talking about back then. And that was something I hadn't really thought about for a while, is the way imps are sort of these little fires trying to grow.
Yeah.
I'd sort of, I guess I'd just forgotten that aspect of how demons worked. And I'll be interested to maybe keep an eye on stuff like that going forward.
Yeah.
Part of me still thinks Ur's babies might show up at some point, because we still haven't. Speaking of threads in 7.x that were brought up this chapter, that's a shoe that hasn't dropped yet.
You think they're going to come in to save the day?
Yep, sure.
I mean, they were made of part of Blake, right? So maybe they feel some attachment to him and are going to come save him.
Well, if there's anything left by the time they show up, maybe.
Yes, fair. That's the end of our discussion on 16.1. But it's time for us to bring out a new discussion question. And obviously we've got demons on the brain a bit. So we want to talk more about demons. And something that I think neither Rose nor Blake have really thought of in this situation is, can we summon a demon to help ourselves out of this situation? I mean, obviously, maybe it's a bit like fighting fire with fire, but...
yeah, well, I mean, Rose's whole plan in, I think it was 15.6 or 15.7, was to bounce back any demons they pulled out that were big enough that she could, talk to them.
Yes.
That's obviously a huge concern with
yes.
the lawyers. The only demon I would have thought, the lawyers can't bounce that back, would have been Barbatorum, but that ship's already sailed.
Yep, he's already got an ally, I think. So yeah, we were kind of thinking from this, when would you use a demon, when wouldn't you? And I guess this question that we've come to is, in what kinds of situations is it okay to use a demon? Can you, listener, yes you, think of any situations where you would summon a demon for something?
Yes. And, obviously, in our interlude a couple of days ago, we saw that this can go badly. So I feel like that's something to keep in mind, is what is a situation where you feel that not only there's just the karmic wrongness of all this, as well as the actual wrongness, because fuck karma, is enough to justify the danger to yourself as well.
Yeah. So leave your answers to that in our discussion thread, which you'll see linked down in the show notes down below. Or hey, just leave us a note about what you thought of this episode, or what you thought of Judgment 16.1 in general.
Yeah, and, feel free to throw out ideas about All Packed Up. As we said, schedule coming very soon, but it's not too late to throw out some ideas, and we might add them on.
Yeah, there are a lot of parts of the stream that are built around audience engagement, so get engaged.
If you want more details on that, and if you want to see that sort of schedule when it's published, we'll probably talk about it whenever it comes out. But if you want the hot scoop, you got to go to doofmedia.com, because that's where it'll be posted first.
Yes, and not just the schedule, but you can also find all kinds of cool things on doofmedia.com. Colouring in sheets, some fun flash games, and a whole bunch of podcasts, like Kingslingers, the new podcast, which is talking about Stephen King, the Gunslinger, the Dark Tower books in particular, I suppose. They just had their second episode come out, and I listened to it today. It's good times.
Yeah, I as we've said, I'm very much enjoying the switcheroo.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the story as well. I can't wait to watch this podcast go forward.
Yeah.
We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yes.
This network is built on our patrons, and we try to give back, obviously, not just through these podcasts, but if you subscribe at the $5 tier, I think we mentioned this last episode, you get access to the Doof and Chill streams. We just did our one where we played AI Dungeon, and you can watch the recording of it if you sign up, and you really should. That was fucking hilarious.
It was very fun. There were multiple moments where we all just kind of descended into laughter for a good 30 seconds and couldn't speak.
Yeah, and so we did that with our listeners. We were taking suggestions from the listeners, as well as trying to come up with shenanigans ourselves.
Yeah.
And, the AI dungeon did not disappoint.
Yes, it was good fun. To get access to all that great stuff, plus others, if you're interested, head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia. And hey, while you're on patreon.com/doofmedia, why don't you check out Wildbow's Patreon as well? Because he is a Patreon-supported author, and he can only do the cool stuff that he does because other people do the cool stuff of giving him money. So go to patreon.com/wildbow and do that.
Yep. So apart from that, we'll see you on Wednesday, because we've got another bonus chapter this week.
What?
On the 29th of January, we're jumping into 16.2.
Yep. So we'll see you then.